Hi, I'm Samara Garrett and welcome to The Buzzword. I'm a facilitator for Smart Recovery and we're excited to bring you these 3 episodes of The Buzzword, addressing alcohol and other drug use and LGBTIQA+ people and communities. I spoke to people of different generations, identities, genders and sexualities and how they viewed alcohol and other drug use among queer folk, what are some of the current issues facing our community, and things alcohol and other drug providers can do to be more inclusive of LGBTIQA+ people. We also welcome alcohol and other drug experts from Peak Body AOD, Directions Health, and Carolica programs, and gain insights into AOD provision from an organisational perspective. In episode 1, I asked people to share their perspectives on AOD use and LGBTI+ communities from the outside looking in, and I quickly discovered it isn't all parties and rainbows.
I'm 53, she, her. I am a lesbian in my sexual preference and queer in my political status.
I'm 38 years old, cisgender gay man, he, him.
I'm 25 years old. I identify as a bisexual woman and I use she, her pronouns.
I'm 31. My pronouns are he, him, and I identify as a trans man.
I'm 54. I'm cisgendered female. My pronouns are she and her.
AOD is the peak body for alcohol and other drug services, including harm reduction services and also treatment services. Really, our fundamental aim is to support those services to do the best work they can.
My name's Stephanie Stevens. I've got the honour of being the Director of Services at Directions Health. We're a specialist drug and alcohol service provider and a primary healthcare provider here in the ACT and in surrounding New South Wales.
So Carolica Programs has been in the Canberra community for 44 years now, and we provide a range of programs. With drug and alcohol services, I think largely we understand stigma and discrimination.
I think we like them. Certainly when I came out and was partying in the scene, most of it was ecstasy and other types of either downers like benzos or speed and things like that.
I've always viewed the LGBTQIA+ community to be party central. Lots of drugs, lots of alcohol, and I always assumed, this is based on my experience growing up, it was that social exclusion drew me to drugs and alcohol as a teenager in a very big way. I would then, I think, probably drive some of those behaviours in the people around me and then seek out other people that were interested in those sorts of behaviours. When you're feeling isolated, feeling excluded, feeling out of control because you're grappling with elements of your identity that you're struggling to get your head around and people are telling you are bad or wrong or whatever it might be, the escapism element and the bonding over self-destructive behaviours can be a source of community that you're craving. And so they've been some of my perceptions of alcohol and other drugs.
I struggle to answer this question a bit because I myself have distanced myself with alcohol quite significantly over the last 5 to 10 years. And being bi as well, I find myself within queer spaces and also outside queer spaces. So I have not as many experiences in queer spaces as other peers. Also, like I said, not much of a drinker, so I don't find myself in these spaces very much. The reputation of alcohol and other drugs, what I've noticed is I never see anyone without it. Like when I go out and hanging out with people in the evening, there's always a drink in someone's hand or a cigarette in somebody's hand or some other substance in somebody's hand. I think the reputation is that it's just kind of always there. It's a crutch for people and it's a very reliable form of connection for many people and to culture.
I think when I first hit my late teens and I started to get into sort of like the clubbing scene and all that kind of stuff, it seemed to be, the perception was that it was much easier to access alcohol and other drugs within the queer community. It seemed to be that it was sort of a bit of a label of we go out, we do the crazy things, we get messed up on all sorts of substances, MDMA, ecstasy, things like that, cocaine, and we just party all the time. Originally it was getting into the scene from a lesbian perspective and then changed, obviously moving into more of the trans community. I don't know what it was, but from my own personal experience, it seemed to come across as though it was more acceptable for the trans community to be seeking out pills or that. I don't know if that was maybe a stereotypical female versus male perspective in sort of high-end communications. But yeah, there definitely seemed to be a shift.
I think to the world outside of the LGBTIQA plus community, the perception is party, Mardi Gras, alcohol, drugs, fun, dress-ups, sex, risky behaviour,
We know LGBTIQA plus people experience higher rates of discrimination and trauma, and a history of trauma increases the likelihood that people will use drugs and also seek out alcohol and other drug harm reduction or treatment. Every few years, AOD conducts a one-day snapshot of people using an alcohol and other drug service. In 2018, we asked a question about sexual orientation. Based on the results, I'd estimate that around 10 to 14% of people accessing alcohol and other drug services are LGBTIQA+.
The statistics show us that substance use in the LGBTI community is anywhere from 3 to 6 times higher than in the non-LGBTI community. Mood disorders can be up to 3 times higher. Suicidality can be up to 10 times higher, and that, and again higher in a trans and gender diverse population.
Recognising that there's so much trauma behind so many people's experiences of reaching out for help, particularly around substance use, because it's already so stigmatised. Often people seeking support, seeking healthcare, are nervous around how that's going to be seen, let alone around any other factors in their life that necessarily haven't been affirmed.
I think alcohol is an issue. It's really accessible. We still have a notion of having a big night is like losing multiple brain cells rather than just having a couple of drinks and a laugh and all those sorts of things. Alcohol is so socially accepted that we don't pick up on those members of our community who are doing it on an ongoing basis and in a way that is harmful because we don't cross that boundary with them.
I think stigma around AOD, I think just that lack of insight, the lack of proportionality in the way it's spoken about, this idea that drugs equals snowballing, spiraling addiction and stealing things and it does for some people. Like, it's really important to look out for people who are getting in too deep and for whom their drug and alcohol use is affecting their health. But it's also really important to realise that use of alcohol and drugs doesn't necessarily mean that extreme. And I think that people, probably to do with, decades of depiction in pop culture and public health advertising, have a really big misconception about what these sorts of things actually mean.
So I work in sexual health. For me, what I see are the main areas of concern is chemsex and people getting really, really high or really drunk in order to have sexual connections with other people and feel like they can be open enough to have a sexual experience. A lot of people have either a lot of shame around sex or shame around who they're having sex with, or they just use it as their way to kind of get into a sexual mental space and the ability to explore pleasure and that kind of thing. I don't think it's necessarily inherently a problem, but I do think that it kind of leads to some risky behaviour and I want people to feel safe in sexuality and pleasure and not have to be high to do that.
Self-medicating. It can be a really, really damaging thing because mental health in the queer space is rife. Trans community alone, we're 20% more likely to commit suicide than any other minority group. The same goes with the lesbian and gay community. They're usually about 7 to 8 times more likely than any other group. One of the 6 basic needs of a human being, one of them is belonging. And if you don't feel like you belong anywhere, you don't look out and see anyone who's similar to you, or you're struggling with your identity, because I want to belong or because I don't know how to connect, I'm going to just herd mentality and just follow, or I'm too nervous or I don't feel like I'm strong enough to stand up and have a voice around myself. So in order to get into that, definitely a coping mechanism.
I think about loneliness and people using alcohol for loneliness, people using alcohol to take the social pressure off, social lubrication, that's the word, and alcohol probably amongst females. And the research backs that up.
The service system and structures as a whole have really failed our community. I don't think LGBTI Plus, people have really had historically a chance to be affirmed in the service system or to be seen and affirmed for who they are. So I think we're starting from a basis of recognising there's so much trauma, and services have typically not known how to be supportive and be safe for people of diverse backgrounds, cultures, lifestyles, identities.
We also understand about minority stress, and the minority stress comes from discrimination and stigma. So we try and undo some of that stress that has been caused, as well as look for just ways that people can use their substances a bit safer and not put their health at risk, whether that be their physical or mental or emotional health or spiritual health, that they're actually protecting that and learning how to enhance healthy behaviours and wind back some unhealthy behaviours.
Over 40% of adults in Australia have tried an illicit drug at some point in their lives. And obviously the proportion who have consumed alcohol is much higher. Most of those people, though, don't develop substantial issues with alcohol and other drugs. There are some really well-known risk factors for developing issues that cause people to seek treatment or seek some harm reduction from alcohol and other drug services. We know that histories of trauma and discrimination are really important drivers of people's alcohol or other drug use tipping over into patterns that they recognize are not helpful for them, are not healthy for them.